Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahe Tejasvinavati Tamastu Ma Vidvishavahe. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So we left off on 17, 18, beginning 18. So just running back 16, he says that the undeveloped intellect sees the self as the doer of everything. So it's like self becomes a goodie or a baddie, but something infinite isn't, it's just the catalyst. It doesn't partake in the finite. So we're actually responsible for all that we do. So then in 17, he puts forward that one who's free from egotistical notion, that notion of ego, doesn't have it, whose intellect's not tainted. Even if one's killing, the intention is something different. And in fact, throughout our lives, in everything we do, in order for us to survive, indirectly, we're killing. The minute we walk on the street, we might be killing an insect, but we don't have the intention to do that. If we saw it, hopefully we wouldn't deliberately go and smash it. We'd like maybe move out of the way, let it be. So your spiritual evolution, you live in this universe, this world. It's like damage limitation. It's what you can do the least to interfere with your whole. But at the same time, you exist. So you are, even if you eat the plant, you're killing something. In fact, the gardener or the farmer cultivates the land in such a way they have to kill one thing to make another thing happen in some way or another. You may do it eco-friendly even. I know that in the academy, they don't put any fertilizers on any of the plants that are grown, like maybe the fruit trees or something. They use different bugs to eat. One bug eats, big fish eats little fish, use one bug to get rid of another or so to keep the plant healthy. So here he's put forward, even free from egotistic notion, whose intellect is not tainted. So when it comes to the species, where it's animals or where it's humans, it has more of an impact on us because it's closest to us. We identify more. And the more we identify, the less we interfere with that orchestra of life, if we want to evolve. So we had a question. Here he says you're not bound if you kill. So the question was, Tim, if you'd like to read the question.
The question to begin the class. How does chapter 18, verse 17, advance the argument of chapter 2, verse 11? And chapter 2, verse 11 was the famous verse, the wise grieve neither for the living nor the dead.
So, I think everybody's got their Gita in front of them. You want to explain your question a bit more in what you were after, or what? Does anybody need any explanation on the question? Good.
I think in the chapters 2, I think that's where Arjuna says, "I do not want to fight," because he sees all the relatives in front of him, and then Krishna says, the wise do not really despise the act of life or death. And over here, I think he kind of gives the reason as to why it is so. I think he brings in the whole concept of self-realization. He also talks about, somebody being free of egoistic notion. So when you really attain that state, then you have a sort of detachedness. So you would not really be, you would not see the act of life or death to be something that you have to be emotionally attached to.
Anybody else wants to add? Or needs a clarification with question?
Just a comment really, which is that in our observation of nature, I mean, non-human nature or the events that occur in the natural world, nature also doesn't grieve for life or death, or doesn't see value in life or death in particular. I suppose my observation of that might be influenced by Taoism in a way, which takes the position that there isn't necessarily sanctity in life in a special kind of way. That's just a comment, really.
Thanks. Anybody else wants to add? Comment?
Can I just ask Peter, when you said there's no sanctity in life, what does that mean, if I may ask?
Go
ahead. Well, I suppose sanctity is, especially in the West, in sort of Abrahamic terms, is a loaded term. And we tend to think of life as having a special privilege, especially human life, and it's privileged by sanctity, which is some kind of protection around one's eternal soul. But I don't think that's the way that I view the world anymore, or the way that I view life anymore. And I think Atman also, it doesn't recognize particular parts of, well, it doesn't, yeah, it also probably doesn't give any special privileges to itself or other people in terms of our understanding of biological life.
Sam, you have anything?
I'm just sitting with what everyone is saying and contemplating.
Anyone else? Tamas.
So my question is just basically my understanding of the Gita, which is not much. So I'm still a very fresh learner. When I was reading the different verses that we're supposed to look at, particularly the verse in chapter 2, Krishna's reasoning here is that he believes that the Kauravas have led an unethical life, and so they have strayed from the path of righteous conduct for the country and for kith and kin. But then if I look at this verse, which is at verse, what's this?
17.
Verse 17. He sort of gives another example of a surgeon. And here I'm a bit confused because a surgeon's role and a warrior's role and the responsibilities that they have. Because ideally the surgeon's task or dharma is to save a life. And when things are beyond their control, then they lose a life. And that's why they don't incur any sort of liability in that sense. But if we were going to look at the advancement of one verse to another verse, how do we find that connecting link? Because I can't see it.
Anyone? Tim.
Well, Guru sort of speaks my mind on this one. In chapter 2, it's an emotional response that Arjuna is involved with. But when we come to this verse, chapter 18, 17, it's linking it into the pursuit of the self. So it's refining the issue of actions that don't touch on your pursuit of the self if you do them in the right way. So it's moving from an emotional comment to a sophisticated integration with the pursuit of the self. That's how I think these two verses connect and evolve.
Okay. Anyone else? Anyone move ahead? Okay, go ahead, Vidya.
I think the key thing that Krishna is saying is the element of ego. So if you look at verse 17 in chapter 18, he's talking about a man who does not have an egoistic notion. And so vis-a-vis, he is now telling Arjuna, he's a man who doesn't have ego, so you should not be grieving for the living and the dead. He's just reminding Arjuna of his ability, his capacity, and the kind of character Arjuna is. So that's the first verse that Lord speaks in chapter 2, after the one full chapter and 10 verses. So the key concept here is, irrespective of who the character is, whether it's Arjuna, whether it's the doctor, or anybody, as long as the actions are selfless, there is no element of bondage to the action vis-a-vis the fruits of action. Basically Krishna is saying you'll be absolved of the action and the consequences of the action if you're coming from a point of a selfless service.
Okay. Anyone else? Anyone want to answer Dharma's question? So essentially, just going back to Tamas' question, the surgeon saves a life, of course it could lose a life. The warrior saved in the epic, Arjuna is fighting for a bigger cause. So he upholds the righteous value rather than a value directed to his own self-interest if he doesn't fight. That's all. But we all have our vasanas, so we all got to do something with them. So we've all got to evolve through the world's life. We've all got to dissolve that to actually get to the self. But the self's not part of those actions. But in order to reveal that self, we've got to go through that cause and effect actions. But you're not tainted by them if your focus is with the intention just to get to the self. Nature takes its course, as Peter was mentioning. There's no, from a perspective of self, there's no goods and bads, it's just taking a course. Summer comes, the spring is gone, and the winter comes, autumn comes, winter comes, when you can see the season. They're just phenomena, a cycle of change. Birth comes, we're alive, we have a set of vasanas, we pursue our natures, and we die. If we pursue them with an aspiration of evolution, then we get out of that which binds us. So that aspiration can't be with any egocentric notion. So quite rightly, the verse in 12 is an emotional appeal, or actually it's an intellectual appeal to Arjuna, but he knows full well at that stage that Arjuna can't hear this. It's like the highest philosophy that Arjuna can't hear. Here it's actually like a state free from egotistic notion. You don't have any ego. You're not stained by what you pursue, because there's no ego to make it good or bad. You're out of it. There's no vasanas. Only from the onlooker who's got the ego, you feel it's one way or the other, because you're in your state of evolution. You've still got your activities to do. But from the self, there's no, can't touch it. Self's not tainted by any of it. So you're not bound when you've got there. The dreamer, the waker's not bound by the dream. It's gone. You know, there's nothing in it. At that state, not at right now everything's got some affectation and there's some egotistical value in it or interest in it. So free from egotistic notion, not bound. As we identify with the body, mind, and intellect, the aspects which are in us, which are perishable, we have that attachment, so we're affected. In respect to us as human beings or other creatures. It's not that you don't feel, you have feelings. You have to do your activities because you've got actions that you've got to do in terms of your nature and vasanas. But you're not affected. And your focus is on something bigger. But here it's not bound, state to. Anybody else before we move from here? Let's go.
Jnanam jneyam parijñāta trivida karma chodana karanam karma karteti trivida karma sangraha.
Guru, if you could read the verse.
Verse 18.
Mhm.
Knowledge, known, and knower are the threefold impulse to action, while instrument, action, and actor are the threefold constituents of action.
Okay, so he's just giving the another aspect to the analysis of action before he actually gets into, from verse 19 onwards, he'll get into the threefold constituents of Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas, the qualities of action, happiness, knowledge, etc. So here he's just giving what's required. So one needs knowledge for any action, and there needs to be somebody who does that action, that actor. So knowledge required for the action, jnanam, to complete what needs to be done. So you've got, so jnanam is the knowledge, jneyam is what's to be known, and what's to be known is what's to be done. So you've got a subject, object, and the knowledge, which enables the subject to and the object to come together to create that activity. So there's threefold impulses to what's to be done, and that action. You have the actor, the instrument, as we were talking about before, and the actual actions which is done. So it's like saying, if you need, if we simplify it, you need knowledge behind the action that you perform, the actor. So you might have a tennis player, the actor, you have a racket, that the instrument which you do it with, and the actual game that you're playing. And you need that knowledge of that to do it. That's all it's saying, really. There's not much more than that. So rather than making it complicated, you just keep it straightforward. That's okay. Let's read the verse.
The verse goes through a further dissection of action, gives the threefold impulse motivating action, also the three constituents of action. The threefold impulse to action comprise knower, parijñāta, known, jñeya, and knowledge, jnana. Knower is the subject, known the object. Knowledge relates to the action to be accomplished. To accomplish an action, the subject must meet object with the knowledge of what is to be done. For example, pot making requires a potter. Subject: the potter must possess the knowledge of pot making. He must conceive the object, the pot. Thus, the three factors go together. Shall I go ahead?
Mm-hmm.
The three constituents of action are actor karta, instrument karana, and action karma. These are actually the middle three of the 5 contributory causes of action given in verse 14. The first and the last not mentioned here are seat, body, and Lord, consciousness. In the above example, Karta, actor, is the potter, Karana, instrument to make the pot, and Karma, actual making of pot. Again, these three constituents go together for executing action.
So just giving, you can reflect on it away from the class, it's just giving you the bits and pieces which of us in relation to our world and what we need to do and the knowledge backing it and how to do it. So now we actually start from 19 onwards, 19 to 28. So 28 or more than that. The sattvic, rajasic, tamasic aspects of knowledge, action, actor, intellect, vritti. We've done renunciation, in fact, in the beginning. And here's where you make your, from here onwards, you might want to make your chart, personality chart, giving you an analysis of where you're at in your own spiritual development. It's for nobody else, it's just for yourself. That's the key thing to remember. It's just for yourself. But it gives you an idea of where you are sattva in your sattva, rajas and tamas. What you've got to do to up it. So let's go 19.
Jnanam karma cha karta cha tridhaiva guna bedata prochyate guna sankhyane yathavat shrunnutanyapi.
Esha, do you have the... Okay. Peter, if you could read the verse.
Yeah, knowledge, action, and actor are also said to be threefold, according to the distinction in Gunas, qualities in the science of Gunas. Hear them also duly.
So sattva, rajas, and tamas. So we're a little bit familiar with sattva, rajas, and tamas. And here's the detail of it. So he starts with, in this verse onwards, jnanam, karma, and karta. So jnanam, knowledge, karma, action, karta, actor. You've got to have the knowledge to back your action, and you've got to have the person doing the action. So that analysis of sattva, rajas, and tamas. Sattva, rajas, and tamas are just mental thought textures within you, within each one of us. The quality of our personality, which in this knowledge is offering us the capacity to maneuver from that lowest state to the most refined state. So tamas being the lowest state, mental state, to sattva, that refined, poised objectivity. So you need to just like get onto it, recognize it in yourself when you're in that temperament of perhaps tamas. The idea of tamas, we've heard it before in these chapter 17 and previously at the beginning of this chapter. Tamas is it doesn't get done, it doesn't happen. It's that recklessness, heedlessness, laziness, I don't care type of attitude. Say you do it, don't do it. Karenge dekenge. So Angie always used to say to us, see it, we'll see it, we'll do it, but it doesn't happen. So slightly better than that is that rajas, that state of frenzied mind, always on the go, rushing, hurrying, actualizing the activity, but it's got a lot of agitation in that activity. It's not poised, calm. It's always rushing, hurrying, worrying, as it were, all the time in some meeting, all the time in something, but not really in something. I know one fellow who, it's not because he's idle, or it's not because he's not concerned, or, but he keeps his phone off. But he's the owner of a good number of companies, but he keeps his phone off, and when people are sending messages, he doesn't answer any of it. It just takes time to answer them. So he makes sections of when he does X, Y, Z in his life. So it's efficient. It's not that he's lazy, and it's not that he's idle. They're not complacent. Some people who are complacent keep their phones off because they don't bother to answer back. It's not like that. It's very accurate. So the Rajasic person's always like rushing, hurrying, always a mind in 10 different places, but not clear. It's agitated. So there's a difference in the same action. So the Sattvic person has that availability for you. Doesn't matter who they are. The availability, that mind is clear, poised, not anxious, not pressured, not full of worry, subjective. So these are the guidelines, Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas, in each of the activities. Now we're going to see it. So it's not for anybody else, it's just for yourself. I remember in our yoga classes, often we'd say as an instruction, you're doing the action. And the first thing you do is you look at the next person beside you to see what they're doing, to see how far you've got, and you see you can't get into it. You think, oh my God, they're there. So you push yourself and you hurt yourself. But the reality is this personality chart is not for what somebody else is looking at you doing. It's not for what you are looking at somebody else doing. It's just about understanding where you are at. So you up it for yourself. Gently ease into it. Keep going. Keep gently pushing, stretching a little bit more and more. It doesn't matter what somebody else is doing. It matters what you're doing in your own evolution. So everybody has this 3 portions, these 3 gunas, and we all have different portions of these gunas, Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. We've all got to refine it to that Sattva to get that clarity, that poise, to remove that worry, anxiety, to not have that stress, but to actually be focused on getting to that truth. Let's read it. We'd read the commentary.
The 4th topic from verses 19 to 28 describe 3 types of jnana, knowledge: karma, action, and kata, actor. This distinction is based on the sattvika, rajasika, and tamasika gunas contained in the branch of knowledge known as Sattva.
Thank you.
A human being is constituted of the 3 gunas in different proportion. These qualities determine one's mental temperament. Tamas is the state of mind that is inactive, inert, indolent, heedless, the lowest state of being. Superior to tamas is rajas. Rajas is a state of mind ridden with passion, action, agitation, the state of vacillating emotion and impulsive action. Sattva is the highest state of equanimity, serenity, poise, free from worldly passion and agitation. The next 9 verses describe the sattvika, rajasika, and tamasika knowledge of knowledge, action, and actor. They draw your attention to the analytical constituents of action. Study and reflect upon them. It should help raise you from the state of tamas to rajas to sattva, and then attain spiritual enlightenment.
So question just right now, if we trust, what's the general status quo of the society, or what do you think? Status quo is maybe not the right word, but what's the general feeling? Are we in a tamasic society, rajasic society, sattvic, or how do we feel? What do we think? Esha.
I think in the West, we're definitely in a rajasic state, because if we're not doing something productive, then we're not seen as being productive. It's almost like we have to measure success by what we're doing. And yeah, it's even just embracing the art of doing nothing seems for some people to be quite strange. And it's like something you have to try and do, because we're conditioned to be in action, using time to be doing something productive. So yeah, I think we're very much in a rajasic state.
And what's it pointing out in rajas? What's the aspect of rajas which is it okay?
I mean, the I agree with what Esha just said, but it probably applies to all countries in the world, and it's just the sort of political fissures and conflicts within society produce agitation and cause individuals to remain in a rajasic state of mind perpetually, and our increasing exposure to media and social media probably also keeps us within that rajasic state of mind, or perhaps even pushes us lower to a tamasic mind, just because we're encouraged to be mindless and distracted, and which, yeah, so probably we're just naturally in a rajasic state, but being pushed down, and we should be wary of that.
Vidya, you want to answer?
I mean, I agree to what is being said, but saying that there is an increasing awareness in the West about the need to undo some of the damages that the Rajasika emotions cause on humanity, the vacillating emotions. And therefore, there's an earnest attempt by at least a group of people who want to, try and slow down and pause and think, and hence why there is an increasing interest to learn these kind of philosophies. However, again, being a commercial world, there is a great amount of opportunity, and sometimes the Eastern philosophies are packaged as a commercial product rather than a genuine pursuit of knowledge and self-unfoldment. And that is where, even there somebody is genuinely interested to pursue that, can be waylaid in that journey. So it's very difficult to navigate it. And it's very difficult, even for us as people who are students of this class, you know, living in this kind of a rajasic world, despite the best attempts, I'm very often caught out at the end of the day. You know, I get caught out of that frenzy of oscillating emotions. And then I sit in, when I do my reflection, I'm thinking, why did I feel the way I felt for that 2 hours? You know, I get drawn into the activity. So it's very hard. Pursuing this knowledge in this world is very, I mean, at this point of time is more hard than perhaps a few decades ago, especially in the world of internet and everything.
Mm-hmm. So, state of Rajas generally. Isha.
Yeah, just to add to that, I also think we're going in a very, generally speaking, as a world, we're going down a Tamasic way with AI on the horizon. I mean, the things that are coming up and that we're seeing, it's almost like the future is to be numbing our brains so we can use this technology to think for us. I mean, I listened to this program the other day and it just made me laugh because I just couldn't understand it. And they were talking about how AI can benefit us. And they gave the example of helping us with recycling. So some people don't put the right containers in the right boxes, and AI can help do this. I just thought, well, isn't that just dumbing us to the point where we're just not going to be able to use our, our mind? So yeah, I think we're also going down. I mean, I'm not saying at all it's not useful AI. It can be in many ways, but if we're using it for such things, then it's only going to take us down the Tamasic route as well. But I do think, though, how we're also moving in society, for many of us, does lead to dissatisfaction, and that then increases our thirst to want to study things like the scriptures, or want to know more about ourselves. So you could flip it as well.
Okay. So it seems to be agreed. So generally at best, we're in the society at Rajas. So unless you're consistent with this type of knowledge within you, wherever you get it from, it doesn't have to be the Bhagavad Gita, but it's something which has that universal principle which takes you within. Get stuck with the Rajas at best.
Sorry,
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, Parul. I also just wanted to follow up with Esha's comment, which is that the general economic forces prevailing now are really turning workers into consumers, and workers were engaged in action primarily. Consumers are engaged in observation, and it would appear to me that consumerism itself is more associated with a Tamasic frame of mind, and that's also, that would be a concern to me in terms of the way society is developing.
So it seems to be spiraling one way, which means that you've got to have something which has perennially been there anyway, whether or not we recognize that knowledge of eternal principles. From the word go, it's been Sattva, Rajas, Tamas. We seem to be thinking it's now because we're seeing the effects of now, but it's in the time of how the Bhagavad Gita, the Mahabharata, the war came about. There were just perhaps slightly different focuses. They still had perhaps different sorts of technology there. So as long as you have a predominance of Tamas, you'll have certain traits. Of Rajas, you'll have certain traits. Of Sattva, it'll be of a certain a different lifestyle. So that's what it's talking about here. How do you evolve out of that tamas and rajas? The influences are there outwardly. This is talking about strengthening yourself inwardly in how you relate to the outwardly to your world, because you can't escape your world. It's your projection. It's there. How do you relate to that world? So it might be going down in some sense. As we see it, but that's the perennial cycle. Got it. Okay. Somebody had something before we move from here. Dhamma, one more.
So I have a question, Paroji, particularly with this verse. So I come from the East, and Malaysia is not a mono-ethnic country. We have 3 major races, and then we have the indigenous community. So there's a lot of diversity. But what I realized is in Malaysia, Malaysians reward rajasic temperaments. So when rajas becomes the dominant trait, either for work or for working culture, then what happens is the younger generation tends to gravitate towards rajas to become part of the society. So to combat this, well, in a peaceful manner, now I'm sort of dealing with the Indians and how the Indians look at life, which is to me it's sort of like a culture shock, because there are Indians here in Malaysia and there are Indians in India, but the way they think and the way they approach life, to me, there's a world of a difference. So when I was looking at this particular verse and how we can improve ourselves, as a younger generation, there is still a top-down hierarchical way of how things are run. And if there was need for me to engage with, say, experts who have this sort of a worldview, do you think there's a possibility that leadership could look at it the same way? Because with the Indians, they do look at the younger generation as contributors. But in my country, so this is not the West, this is the East, leadership is top down. And if Rajasic is the order of the day, then Sattva will be kicked out, Tamas will be asked to leave. But when I do look at how this is framed, it seems as if we need a balance of all 3 so that things function as they could. Am I right in grasping it in this manner?
First of all, there's no Eastern, Western in Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. Just get it out of your head. You think East has got something better. It would if it used it. When anybody uses it, whether you're from the West or the East, it really doesn't make any difference. When you use those qualities of Rajas, you become Rajasic. When you use Tamas, you become Tamasic. When you use Sattva, you become Sattvic. It's as simple as that. There's no East, no West. It's a matter of when you prepare to develop yourself internally, that's what you become. Or when the society raises its values, that's what it becomes. Since the general overall picture in the world is Rajasic, Rajas is generally rewarded because that's the ceiling of growth to most people, unless you're taking on the universal values of life, which is something very internal, not looking out to get your bonuses. It's something, an internal growth. So in the Vedanta treatise, there's a line which I always quote: all external warfare is made up of lack of internal development. So all stresses are made up of lack of internal development. All Rajas is rewarding is an incentive, you rewarding. Sattva gives you an initiative, which is a reward. It's very different. It's nothing to do with, yes, in some cultures there's a evolution, and that culture which uses it, there's an evolution of giving. It's generally been there, it's refined itself to some degree. But if you don't use it, it means nothing. It's like the hare and the tortoise. You might have the speed, but if you don't use it, it means nothing at all. So each one of us, before leadership can be worked as that one who has sattva, pushes up the rest of the sattva, the tamas to the rajas, it enables, it can do it. If you have these type of values, you reflect it out. But you've got to have these type of values. You can't just teach it to reflect it out. And you've got to know the skill of actually entering into it. So the first thing one must do is evolve oneself. Forget about everybody else and reflect it out. It is a rajasic, tamasic world. That's the world of opposites. So evolve yourself to get to that understanding of what sattva is. First of all, get yourself in a predicament of rajas, of acting, momentum, and then think of the bigger values. It's the sattva. But you got to evolve yourself first before you decide to let anybody else, tell anybody else what sattva is. You've got to evolve yourself. And it doesn't belong to any country. It's global. The self doesn't belong to India, just happens to be somewhere where they perhaps cultivate this knowledge more readily because of the ancientness of it. It's an old system. Doesn't mean anybody uses it. And those who uses it get the benefit. But you could be using it anywhere in the world. It's a universal law. Never make the mistake. It belongs to anybody, it belongs to everyone. You know, we make that mistake. So rajas will be rewarded in the world. Sattva is rewarded within. It's an initiative. It doesn't depend on somebody giving you something. It comes totally from within. The stress is gone. The understanding's there. The objectivity's there. It's not dependent on anything outside. So that's kind of, I hope that's useful. But we make the mistake of one to another. Isha, you have some, sorry, Vidya, you had something.
And I just wanted to use this analogy with Rajas. It's like your stock market. It goes up, it comes down, it goes up, it comes down, and it's generally oscillating as what we read in the verse. Whereas with Sattva, it's a linear onward portion. It's a point of no return, and it cumulatively increases over time. And we've learned elsewhere in Bhagavad Gita where these are qualities that we carry forward to the next birth, and it's only incremental. So I'm not able to paraphrase that word. We read somewhere, Parulji, was it in Vedanta Treatise, where it's a bridge with where your path vanishes at the back and you're going in going forward. And hence why it's worth our while to invest in improve that sattvic quality in us incrementally, slowly but surely, to gain the benefits of being sattvic. You can still have rajasic and you can still perform in the world, but what the sattvic enables is that balance of being neutral. If we win, we are neutral. If we lose, we are neutral. We are samadukha in all aspects. That's the importance of cultivating sattvic in a rajasic world.
Just one correction there, Vidya. We're trying to get rid of our we're trying to get rid of our tamas and rajas. See, we're building, if we've not got any rajas, we have to build it to gain momentum. But we don't want rajas. Executing your actions objectively has far more potency than any rajasic action. We want to get rid of the rajas because it's got far more momentum, potency. So we're getting rid of that. We don't want to get stuck with it. Rajas is profit loss. The successful person on the market is objective to the profit and loss, honor and dishonor. We're not concerned with it. Understands the bigger picture. Doesn't get involved in that up and down. Finally, Esha, one more before we finish.
I just wanted to ask, you mentioned about strengthening our inside so we can relate to the external world. Would you say when it comes to practical methods to do this, it's by increasing our sattvic tendencies?
It's only by increasing your sattvic tendencies. Like you may have to go through the rajas because you may be tamasic couch potato, you have to move, get some rajasic momentum in you. You may work on some incentives. If somebody gives me this, I'll do this. But that's only to move you to the sattva. It's only to refine you. Soon as you've got to build up the momentum in the rajas, but the sattva is the only thing worth having.
But when you say strengthen, do you mean then? So not to have any expectation with the fruits of your action. But when actually, I need to think this through a little bit more because I'll think
next week.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so we will start this next week. First quality, sattvic quality, sattvic knowledge. Hari Om.